Picture this. A mother gets a phone call that changes everything. After 16 long years of searching, police have found her missing husband's car in a Texas junkyard, crushed almost beyond recognition. But that's not the shocking part. The shocking part is who brought the car there and what else they were hiding. What started as a simple weekend road trip in 1984 became a nightmare that would span decades. A kind father, an innocent 8-year-old girl, and a gleaming red Cadillac, all vanished without a trace. But sometimes, the most helpful stranger is actually your worst enemy. And sometimes, a small blue handbag holds the key to a truth so twisted, so unbelievable, that it will leave you questioning everything you think you know about human nature. This is the story of Margaret Hallbrook. And trust me, you won't see this ending coming. Clutching the TV remote with white knuckles, waiting for that familiar commercial to air. Her mother Doris sits beside her, both women bracing for the pain that never gets easier. And then it appears on screen, a family photo that once represented pure happiness, a handsome man with a thick mustache and warm eyes, standing proudly beside a little girl with a gap-toothed smile. Next to them, the image of a gleaming red 1979 Cadillac DeVille. 16 years ago today, the announcer's voice cuts through the silence. Jim Hallbrook and his 8-year-old daughter Lucia disappeared during a weekend road trip. They were last seen driving this red Cadillac, license plate THB-143. Margaret clicks off the television. She can't bear to hear the rest. The plea for information, the phone number that never rings with good news. For 16 years, she's paid local news stations to run this segment on the anniversary. 16 years of hope slowly dying. But let me take you back to where it all began. Back to October 1984, when the Hallbrook family had everything to live for. Dr. Jim Hallbrook wasn't just Austin's most beloved dentist. He was the kind of man who made children laugh in the dental chair. His patients adored his silly jokes and those ridiculous ties covered in cartoon teeth. He'd spent years building his practice from nothing, and by 1984, he was finally living the American dream. 8-year-old Lucia was his shadow. Everywhere Jim went, his little fashionista followed. Always concerned about how she looked, what she wore. She had this infectious giggle and an obsession with a small blue handbag she'd saved her allowance to buy. It was from the Barbie accessory collection, a limited edition piece that made her feel so grown up. That October weekend was supposed to be perfect. Jim wanted to show Lucia the fall foliage in the Texas Hill Country. Maybe visit Enchanted Rock. It was their special father-daughter adventure, while Margaret helped her mother rearrange furniture after Margaret's father had passed away. "We'll be back Sunday evening," Jim promised, loading their overnight bags into that red Cadillac he'd worked so hard to afford. Lucia clutched her precious blue handbag, practically bouncing with excitement. Margaret watched them drive away, waving from the front porch. She had no idea she was witnessing the last normal moment of her life. Sunday evening came and went. No phone call, no red Cadillac pulling into the driveway. Margaret tried to stay calm. Maybe they'd decided to extend their trip, see one more attraction. But Jim always called. Always. By Monday morning, panic had set in. Margaret contacted the motel in Llano where they'd planned to stay. "Oh yes," the desk clerk confirmed. "Mr. Hallbrook and his daughter checked out Sunday morning as scheduled. Haven't seen them since." That's when Margaret knew something was terribly wrong. The police investigation that followed was thorough, but ultimately futile. Detectives checked surveillance footage from every gas station and store along their planned route. They interviewed motel staff, diner employees, anyone who might have seen the distinctive red Cadillac or the man with the mustache traveling with a little girl. Nothing. It was as if Jim and Lucia had simply evaporated into thin air. What made it even more baffling was the complete absence of any activity afterward. Jim's credit cards were never used again. His bank accounts remained untouched. His thriving dental practice sat empty, appointment books full of patients who would never see their beloved dentist again. This wasn't a man running away from debt or a failing marriage. Jim Hallbrook had a successful business, a loving family, and everything to live for. He adored his daughter and would never willingly take her from her mother. So what happened on that lonely stretch of Texas highway? Where was the red Cadillac that seemed to have vanished from existence? The technology of 1984 wasn't what it is today. No cell phones to track, fewer security cameras, no GPS systems. The investigation relied on old-fashioned detective work, and despite their best efforts, the trail went completely cold. Margaret refused to give up. She organized search parties, put up missing person flyers, and eventually started paying for those annual television segments. She kept Jim's dental office exactly as he'd left it for years, convinced he would walk through the door any day with Lucia at his side. But years turned into decades. Lucia's 8th birthday became her 9th, then her 10th, then her sweet 16 that would never be celebrated. Margaret aged, but her hope remained frozen in 1984, trapped in that moment when her family drove away and never came back. Friends told her to move on. Grief counselors suggested acceptance, but Margaret knew in her heart that Jim and Lucia were out there somewhere, and she would never stop looking. Little did she know that after 16 years of searching, the answer would come from the most unexpected place, and the person offering to help would turn out to be connected to their disappearance in the most sinister way imaginable. Because sometimes, the monster isn't a stranger lurking in the shadows. Sometimes, the monster is the helpful mechanic who offers you a ride when your car breaks down. Sometimes, evil hides behind a friendly smile and a willingness to lend a hand. And sometimes, a small blue handbag holds secrets that are worth killing for. October 12th, 2000, 16 years to the day since Jim and Lucia vanished. Margaret sits in that same living room, going through the same painful ritual, when the phone rings. Mrs. Hallbrook, this is Officer Daniels with the Austin Police Department. Margaret's heart stops. In 16 years, the police have never called on the anniversary. We've just received a report of potential evidence being found at a junkyard in San Marcos. We believe it could be related to your husband and daughter's case. The words hit Margaret like a physical blow. Evidence. After all these years. What kind of evidence? She manages to ask. We'd prefer not to discuss details over the phone, ma'am. Can you come identify what's been found? We can have a patrol car pick you up. An hour later, Margaret and her mother Doris are staring at something that defies belief. There, in Hargrove's Auto Salvage, sits a red Cadillac DeVille, crushed almost beyond recognition, but unmistakably Jim's car. The license plate is barely visible, but Margaret doesn't need to see it clearly. She walks slowly around the wreckage, her fingers trembling as she points to a small dent in the chrome wheel cover. Jim hit a curb the week before they disappeared, she whispers. We were going to get it fixed. But, her voice trails off. Detective Reyes nods solemnly. Is this your husband's car, Mrs. Hallbrook? Yes, this is their car. But here's where the story takes its first sinister turn. The junkyard owner, Dean Lamb, is standing nearby, looking genuinely confused and apologetic. I'm so sorry, ma'am, he says. I had no idea about the car's history. It was scheduled to be crushed this morning, and I was in my office when I saw the missing persons segment on TV. I recognized the car immediately. How did it get here? Margaret demands. Who brought it in? Dean shifts uncomfortably. That's the thing. I don't have any record of it being brought in. It's not in our system at all. A woman in greasy overalls approaches the group. I saw Reed bring it in, she announces. All eyes turn to her. Reed? Detective Reyes asks. Reed Caraway, Dean explains. He's my partner, runs the technical side. He's our head mechanic. Detective Reyes immediately calls for Reed to be brought in for questioning. When Reed doesn't answer his phone, they send a unit to his home address. And this is where Reed Caraway enters our story. A man whose helpfulness will soon reveal itself to be something far more sinister. Reed arrives at the junkyard about an hour later. A man in his mid-20s with short brown hair and work clothes bearing the junkyard's logo. He seems genuinely confused by all the police attention. The car that was crushed this morning, he says when Detective Reyes explains the situation. Yeah, I heard Dean called you guys about it. Reed approaches Margaret and Doris with appropriate sympathy. "I'm so sorry to hear about your family," he says, offering his hand. "Read Caraway." Detective Reyes gets straight to business. "The car wasn't logged into your system. One of your coworkers said she saw you bring it in." Reed runs his hand through his hair, sighing. "Yeah, that was weird. About a week ago, an older man brought it in when Dean wasn't around, said he didn't have any use for the car anymore and wanted it destroyed." "Did he give you his name?" Detective Reyes presses. Reed shakes his head. "No, and that's what was strange. He paid cash, a good amount too, but when I tried to get his information for our records, he just ran off, left the keys in the ignition and walked away." "Can you describe this man?" Reed furrows his brow. "Tall, maybe 6 feet, thin build, gray hair, though it looked like it might have been dark before. He had a thick mustache, wore glasses, khaki pants, and a button-up shirt. Spoke real quiet, almost hard to hear him." Margaret's breath catches audibly. That sounds like Jim," she whispers to Doris. "What?" Doris says, too loudly. "But that's impossible." The description is eerily accurate. The height, the build, the mustache. Jim always wore button-up shirts, even on weekends, but after 16 years, it doesn't make sense. "Why would Jim get rid of the Cadillac?" Doris asks. "He loved that car." "And why now?" Margaret adds. "After 16 years. And where is Lucia?" Detective Reyes requests to search Reed's office, and Reed immediately agrees. "Nothing to hide," he says. "Just valuable tools and parts catalogs in there." As they walk toward the office building, Margaret notices Reed seems genuinely helpful and cooperative. He unlocks his office door without hesitation, stepping aside to let the police enter first. But while the police search, Doris suddenly clutches at her chest, breathing heavily. "My asthma," she gasps. "I think the stress, my inhaler." Margaret helps her mother find the inhaler and use it, watching anxiously as Doris's breathing gradually steadies. The stress of the day is overwhelming for both women. The police search turns up nothing related to Jim or Lucia. Detective Reyes emerges looking disappointed. "We didn't find anything directly connected to your husband or daughter." Reed offers to come to the station to make a formal statement, and Detective Reyes agrees to let him drive his own truck there. Here's what's chilling about this whole interaction. Reed seems genuinely helpful. He cooperates fully with police, shows appropriate sympathy, and offers assistance. There's nothing obviously suspicious about him. But sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who blend in perfectly, the ones who know exactly what to say and how to act, the ones who've had years to perfect their performance. At the police station, they review the timeline again. Jim and Lucia left on Saturday morning, October 12th, 1984. They checked out of their motel Sunday morning and were never seen again. No credit card usage, no bank activity, no contact with friends or family. The technology of 1984 limited the investigation, but Detective Reyes assures Margaret they'll use modern forensics on the car and try to trace its movements over the past 16 years. As they prepare to leave the station, Reed offers Margaret and Doris a ride home. Detective Reyes looks dubious, but Margaret is exhausted, and Reed has been nothing but cooperative. "I live in Hyde Park," Reed mentions, "not far from you at all." The ride starts normally enough. Reed makes casual conversation about the neighborhood, commenting on changes to Austin over the years, but then something happens that should have set off every alarm bell. "Where exactly in Hyde Park?" Reed asks. "Speedway near 45th, Margaret replies. Reed nods. "Funny, we've never crossed paths before." A few minutes later, Doris suddenly panics. "My inhaler. I think I left it at the junkyard when I had that attack." "Are you feeling okay?" Margaret asks, concerned. "I'm fine now, but I need that inhaler. It's prescription, and I just got it last week." Reed immediately offers to drive them back to get it. "Really? It's no trouble. That junkyard is like my second home." And here's where Margaret makes a decision that will change everything. Despite a flicker of unease, she agrees to go back. Reed has been helpful all day, the police have his information, and her mother needs her medication. But as they drive back towards San Marcos, Reed says something that makes Margaret's blood run cold. They're discussing Lucia, and Reed casually mentions her missing upper teeth and her pink rainbow shirt. Margaret freezes. She had shown Reed a photograph earlier, but he had barely glanced at it while driving. Not long enough to notice such specific details, and she definitely hadn't mentioned which teeth were missing, or that there was a rainbow on Lucia's shirt. How could Reed know these intimate details about her daughter? The answer to that question is more terrifying than Margaret could ever imagine. Margaret's heart pounds as Reed's words echo in her mind. Missing upper teeth, pink rainbow shirt. Details no one could know from a quick glance at a photograph while driving. In the back seat, Doris has gone completely still. Margaret can feel her mother's eyes boring into the back of Reed's head, and she knows Doris heard it too. The rest of the drive to the junkyard passes in uncomfortable silence. Margaret tries to rationalize what just happened. Maybe Reed has a photographic memory. Maybe he saw more than she thought. But deep down, she knows something is terribly wrong. When they arrive back at the junkyard, only a few employees are still working in the distance. The police have finished processing the scene, though the crushed Cadillac still sits cordoned off with yellow tape, a grim reminder of the day's discoveries. Dean is behind the counter, surprised to see them again. "I thought you all left with the police hours ago." "Mrs. Barrett left her inhaler during her asthma attack," Reed explains smoothly. "I put it in my office for safekeeping." They walk down the hallway toward Reed's office. Margaret notices Doris is walking slowly, her eyes darting around as if she's looking for something or memorizing their location. Reed unlocks his office door and steps inside. "I'll just grab it," he says cheerfully. But as the door swings open, both women freeze. There, on the top shelf of a glass cabinet across from the door, nestled between technical manuals, is a small blue handbag, the exact shade of blue that Lucia had carried everywhere. Margaret's breath catches in her throat. "Reed," she says, her voice surprisingly steady. "What's that blue bag in your office?" Reed follows her gaze and pauses for just a moment, a hesitation so brief that someone not looking for it might miss it entirely. "Oh, that old thing," he says casually. "Just an old bag that belonged to my daughter." "It looks exactly like my daughter's," Margaret says, "the one she had with her when she disappeared." Reed shrugs. "Really? That's quite a coincidence." But Margaret notices a slight stiffening in his posture. "Would you mind if I took a closer look?" Reed seems to consider this, then nods. "Sure, I guess it's nothing special." Dean, who's been listening from behind the counter, comments, "I didn't know you had a daughter." Reed shoots him a quick look. "She's not with us anymore, lives with her mother in Houston." Margaret and Doris follow Reed back into the office. He retrieves the blue handbag from the top shelf and hands it to Margaret with what seems like practiced nonchalance. "My daughter never really liked it," he explains. "Got it for her birthday one year, but she wasn't much of a girly girl, never wanted to use it." Margaret takes the bag with trembling hands. It's exactly the same size and style as Lucia's, a small rectangular handbag with white trim and a simple clasp, the kind that was popular in the early 1980s but hadn't been manufactured in years. "This looks like a vintage piece," Margaret says carefully. "What year did your daughter receive this?" Reed shifts his weight. "Oh, I don't remember exactly. A few years back." Doris examines the bag more closely. It's identical to a bag that was popular in the early 80s. I'm surprised they still make them in this style. "Yeah, well, fashion cycles back around," Reed says dismissively. "Vintage is in again." Margaret opens the bag. It's empty, but she examines the interior carefully. Inside, she finds a small white ribbon tag sewn into the lining. Something about it looks wrong. "There's no manufacturer information on this tag," Doris observes, showing it to Margaret. "It looks like something was printed here before, but it's been erased somehow." The white tag bears faint traces of what might have once been text, but it's now impossible to read. "That's strange," Margaret murmurs. "What kind of birthday present doesn't have any tags or branding?" Reed's impatience is barely concealed now. "I wouldn't know. It was given by a friend at her school." But Margaret knows better. She remembers buying Lucia's bag from the original Mattel Barbie accessory collection. She remembers how proud Lucia was of that limited edition piece. "We'll keep it," Doris announces suddenly, clutching the bag to her chest. "If you're sure it's okay." "Like I said, it's just gathering dust here," Reed replies, but there's something in his eyes now. A calculation that wasn't there before. They leave the junkyard with the blue handbag, but Margaret's unease has transformed into full-blown suspicion. As Reed drives them back toward Austin, she notices he keeps glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "We need to get this bag examined by an expert," Doris whispers when Reed stops for gas. 20 minutes later, they're at Burnett Antiques, where Mr. Keller introduces them to Robert, a specialist in vintage toys and collectibles. Robert examines the bag with professional thoroughness, using a jeweler's loupe to check the stitching and materials. "This is definitely from the Mattel Barbie accessory collection," he confirms. "Specifically from their 1983 to 1984 limited edition run. They only produced this particular shade of blue for about 8 months." But then he frowns as he examines the white tag. "This is interesting. The identification tag has been tampered with." "Tampered with?" Robert nods gravely. "Someone deliberately removed the printing, likely using heat treatment. You can see the damage pattern. This is concentrated where the printing would have been. Natural fading would affect the entire tag uniformly." Margaret's heart pounds. "Someone deliberately tried to hide this bag's origin. My wife would confirm this," Robert continues. "But I can tell you with confidence, this is an original 1983 to 84 Mattel product." They thank Robert and head back to the car, both women silent with the weight of what they've discovered. "Margaret," Doris says quietly as they drive away, "someone deliberately removed the identification from this bag. First, Jim's car shows up at Reed's junkyard. Now this bag that's identical to Lucia's is in his office, with evidence of tampering." "I know," Margaret replies, staring down at the handbag. "We need to take this to the police." They're only a few blocks from the antique shop when Margaret notices the brake warning light on her dashboard. The car begins to shudder. "That's strange," she murmurs, tapping the brake pedal. "It feels sluggish." The response gets worse. The pedal goes almost to the floor, and the car starts losing power as they approach an intersection. Margaret quickly pulls over before the vehicle stalls completely. She tries to restart the engine, but it won't catch. "This has never happened before," she says, confused. As Margaret opens the hood to investigate, a pickup truck pulls over behind them. Margaret's stomach tightens as she recognizes Reed climbing out, along with another man, taller, with a heavier build. "Margaret? Doris?" Reed calls out with apparent concern. "Everything okay? I was just driving by and saw you pulled over." What are the odds? After everything that's happened today, Reed just happens to drive by at the exact moment their car breaks down? The other man, who Reed introduces as his friend Jason, examines their engine. "Looks like your brake line is leaking fluid," he announces. "Not safe to drive." Reed offers to have the car towed to the junkyard where he can fix it cheaply. But Doris insists they need to go to the police station first. "We were going to the police station, actually," Doris says firmly, clutching her purse and the blue handbag tightly. Reed and Jason exchange a quick glance. It's so brief, Margaret almost misses it, but there's something in that look that makes her blood run cold. Before they can protest further, Reed has called a tow truck. "They'll be here in about 10 minutes, he announces. As they wait, Doris lingers by Reed's truck, studying the license plate with narrowed eyes. When the tow truck arrives and takes Margaret's car away, Reed insists they come with him to the junkyard. "Actually, Reed," Margaret says, "I've changed my mind. Could you drop us at the police station instead?" "Sure," Reed says easily. But as they drive, Margaret realizes they're not heading toward the police station at all. "Reed, this doesn't seem like the way to the police station." "Taking a shortcut," he replies, his voice different now, colder. "Less traffic this way." In the back seat, Doris is hunched over, surreptitiously texting on her phone while shielding the screen from view. "Reed," Doris says sharply, "where are you taking us? This is not the way." Reed's hands tighten on the steering wheel, his knuckles whitening. The helpful facade is cracking. "Change of plans," he says, his voice now completely void of warmth. That's when Jason reaches under his seat and pulls out a handgun with a silencer attached. He also produces 2 sets of handcuffs. "Put these on," Jason orders, holding out the handcuffs. "Both of you, now." Margaret stares at the gun in shock. "Reed, what is this? What's going on?" "Put the handcuffs on," Jason repeats, his voice harder this time. When they hesitate, he suddenly shouts, "Now! Put them on, or I'll shoot!" With trembling hands, Margaret and Doris comply. Jason roughly checks the restraints, then forces handkerchiefs into their mouths as gags. "That blue bag," Jason says, snatching it from Doris's lap. "It's not yours anymore." He shoves both women down. Margaret onto the floor of the back seat. Doris sideways across the seat. Reed's eyes meet Margaret's in the rearview mirror, all pretense of friendliness gone. His face is a mask of cold calculation. "Be quiet," he says, "or you'll never see daylight again." As the truck continues down increasingly rural roads, Margaret's mind races with terror. The blue handbag was important enough to Reed that he was willing to kidnap them for it. Whatever connection it had to Lucia and Jim, Reed was clearly desperate to keep that information hidden. Through her fear, Margaret catches Doris's eye. Her mother's expression communicates a clear message. "I texted someone. There's hope." But as they turn onto a narrow dirt road, trees closing in around them as they leave civilization behind, Margaret wonders if help will come in time, because now she understands the terrible truth. Reed didn't just know about Jim's car. He didn't just happen to have a bag identical to Lucia's. Reed has been connected to their family's disappearance from the very beginning. The dirt road winds through dense cedar trees for what feels like an eternity before opening into a clearing. In the fading evening light, Margaret can make out a dilapidated farmhouse with peeling white paint and a sagging porch. Nearby sits a battered camper trailer, its once white exterior now stained in gray. This is the middle of nowhere. No neighbors, no passing cars, no one to hear them scream. Reed parks about 50 yards from the house and turns off the engine. With their hands cuffed and gags in their mouths, Margaret and Doris are helpless as Reed and Jason march them toward the farmhouse. But as they pass the camper trailer, something makes Margaret's blood run cold. The entire trailer is rocking violently, as if someone inside is moving frantically or struggling desperately. Reed notices their stares and chuckles darkly. "Looks like the boss is having his fun in there," he says to Jason, nodding toward the shaking trailer. Jason laughs, a sound that makes Margaret's skin crawl. "Yeah, we should wait until he's finished before bothering him with these two. They're going to be trouble enough as it is." The casual way they discuss whatever horror is happening in that trailer tells Margaret everything she needs to know about the kind of monsters she's dealing with. They climb the creaking steps to the farmhouse porch and enter a dim interior that reeks of mildew and cigarette smoke. Reed guides them through a cluttered living room down a hallway to what appears to be an office. An older man with graying hair sits in a chair near the window, reading a newspaper. He looks up as they enter, his weathered face expressionless. "Watch these two," Reed instructs him as Jason removes their gags. "We're going to get something to eat before the boss is done." The older man nods, setting his newspaper aside. "Don't talk to the prisoners," Jason adds sharply, "same as always." Once Reed and Jason leave, Margaret immediately begins pleading. "Please help us. We haven't done anything wrong." "My daughter is missing," Doris adds desperately. "She was only 8 years old when they took her. Please." The older man remains silent, picking up his newspaper, but not actually reading it. For several minutes, Margaret and Doris continue calling out, begging for help, explaining their situation. Finally, after what seems like an eternity, the man glances toward the door, listening for any sign of Reed or Jason returning. Apparently satisfied they're alone, his face softens almost imperceptibly. "They call her Samantha in here," he whispers, his voice barely audible. "But I knew her name was Lucia because that's what they called her before they changed it 4 years ago." Margaret nearly collapses. "She's here? My Lucia is here?" The man nods curtly. "Keep your voice down. You don't know who you're dealing with." "Please help us," Margaret begs, tears streaming down her face. "You look different from those people. I can see you're a good man." "I can be a dead man for being a good man," he replies grimly. Doris leans forward. "Our years are short anyway, sir. Soon we're all going to face judgment for our deeds. Please help us." The man, they'll later learn his name is Micah, seems to wrestle with himself, conflict evident in his lined face. Then they hear footsteps in the hallway. "Please," Doris whispers urgently, "just once more." Micah exhales heavily as if making a momentous decision. "I do this for Samantha," he mutters, pulling out a cell phone. With trembling fingers, he quickly dials 911, whispers their location, and hangs up, slipping the phone back into his pocket just as the door opens. 3 men enter the room. Reed, Jason, and a third man who makes Margaret feel physically sick just looking at him. He's large and muscular, dressed only in a dirty white tank top and boxer shorts. His bare legs are covered in coarse hair, and his arms bear faded tattoos. But it's his eyes that are truly terrifying. Cold, predatory, completely devoid of humanity. This is Charlie Carnes, the boss, the monster. "What are you doing in here, Micah?" Charlie demands, his voice a deep rasp. "You're not supposed to be with the prisoners." Micah takes a step back, fear evident on his face. "These women were noisy, brother. I was just telling them to be quiet." Charlie studies him suspiciously. "Search him," he orders Reed and Jason. "If you find anything, deal with him." He fixes Reed with a meaningful stare. "Can you do that?" Reed nods without hesitation. "Yes, boss." As Reed leads Micah away, Charlie approaches Margaret and Doris slowly, his eyes traveling over their bodies in a way that makes Margaret's skin crawl. "So," he says, his voice thick with menace, "Reed tells me you're here for Samantha." He reaches out and touches Margaret's hair, then leans in to smell it. "I like older women too, not just the young ones." Margaret jerks away from his touch, her handcuffs rattling. "Give her back to us," she demands, summoning courage she didn't know she possessed. Charlie laughs, a deep, unsettling sound that echoes off the walls. "That can't happen, but I'll tell you what I can do." He turns to Jason. "Bring them in." Jason leaves and returns moments later with 3 young women. They appear to be in their mid-20s, all with similar builds and long brown hair. But what's most disturbing is their behavior. They stand with their heads bowed, not making eye contact with anyone, like broken dolls. "Here's the game," Charlie announces, clearly enjoying himself. "Pick which one is Samantha. No discussion allowed. You both have to point at the same time, and if you both get it right, I'll let you see her. Just see her, mind you." Margaret's heart pounds as she studies the 3 women desperately. They all have similar hair color to what Lucia's might be now, though they're grown women rather than the 8-year-old girl she last saw. But then Margaret spots it. One woman, standing slightly to the left, has a small scar near her right eyebrow. The same scar Lucia got falling off her bicycle when she was 6. "1, 2, 3, point," Charlie shouts. Both Margaret and Doris point to the same woman, the one with the scar. Charlie's laughter fills the room. "Well, I'll be damned. Family really can tell each other apart, can't they?" He gestures to the other 2 women. "Take these 2 away." After Jason escorts the others out, only Margaret, Doris, Charlie, and the woman they've identified as Lucia remain. "Lucia," Margaret whispers, her voice breaking. "Sweetheart, is it really you?" But the young woman doesn't respond, doesn't even look up. Her expression remains blank, her eyes distant, as if she's retreated deep inside herself to survive. "Now for the real fun," Charlie says, his voice dropping to a menacing tone. "Samantha, strip!" "No," Margaret cries. "Please don't do this to her." "Leave her alone," Doris adds, her voice shaking with rage and fear. Charlie ignores them. "I said strip, now." To Margaret's horror, Lucia begins to comply, her movements mechanical, her expression still vacant. She shows no emotion, no resistance, as if she's performed this act countless times before. "That's it," Charlie encourages, then suddenly holds up his hand. "Wait, I have a better idea." He turns to Margaret with a cruel smile. "More flavors would be nice." He approaches Margaret and unlocks her chain from the radiator, dragging her to the center of the room. "I like older women too," he repeats, running a thick finger down Margaret's cheek. "Samantha, strip her for me." "No," Margaret gasps, looking desperately at her daughter. "Lucia, I'm your mother. Please." Lucia hesitates. Something flickers briefly in her eyes, but her face remains expressionless as she takes a step toward Margaret. Charlie holds Margaret firmly in place as she tries to back away. "I like to play with my prey before consuming them," he says, laughing as Margaret struggles. With sudden violence, he tears Margaret's blouse at the shoulder. Margaret cries out as Charlie's hands begin to roam over her body. But then, salvation arrives in the most unexpected form. The door bursts open, and Reed rushes in, his face pale with panic. "Boss, police are outside." Charlie freezes, his expression shifting from lustful to furious. "How the hell did they find us?" "They've surrounded the place," Reed reports, his voice tight with fear. Charlie swears violently, then grabs the gun from Reed's waistband. "Then I'll end these two quickly," he snarls, aiming the weapon at Margaret. But before he can pull the trigger, Micah bursts through the doorway and leaps in front of Margaret. 2 shots ring out. Micah crumples to the floor, blood spreading across his shirt. Charlie tries to fire again, but the gun clicks empty. "Damn it! Give me another!" Before anyone can move, the sound of splintering wood echoes through the farmhouse, followed by shouts of "Police! Drop your weapons!" Armed officers flood the room, their weapons trained on Reed, Jason, and Charlie. Jason immediately raises his hands. Reed does the same. But Charlie? Charlie lunges toward the nearest officer. A shot rings out. Charlie staggers back, clutching his thigh where the bullet struck. Instead of falling, he laughs, that same chilling, manic sound. "Do you know how many bullets I've taken in my life?" he taunts, blood seeping between his fingers. Another officer fires, striking him in the shoulder. This time, Charlie falls to his knees, but he's still defiant, still smirking. As officers secure the scene and paramedics rush to Micah's side, Margaret is finally freed from her handcuffs. She immediately goes to Lucia, who stands motionless in the chaos. "Lucia," Margaret whispers, reaching out to touch her daughter's face. "It's me. It's Mom." There's no response, no recognition in those empty eyes. Whatever horrors Lucia endured over the past 16 years have left deep scars, not all of them visible. But she's alive. After 16 years of searching, Margaret has found her daughter. The question now is, can they help Lucia find her way back from the darkness that has claimed her? At the hospital, as Margaret sits beside Lucia's bed watching her daughter stare blankly at the ceiling, Detective Reyes finally pieces together the full, horrifying truth. Reed Caraway, faced with a lifetime in prison, decides to confess everything, and what he reveals is more twisted than anyone could have imagined. "I was 10 years old when it happened," Reed tells the detective, his voice flat and emotionless. "I was with Charlie, my step-uncle. He was everything I thought a man should be. Strong, fearless, not weak like my father." The story Reed tells is a masterclass in how evil spreads, how it corrupts, how it turns children into monsters. In October 1984, Reed and Charlie were near Marble Falls when they spotted Jim's red Cadillac. Charlie had a sick hobby. He called it hunting the kind ones. He specifically targeted people who showed compassion, who were willing to help strangers. They pretended to be hitchhikers, a father and son in distress, and Jim Hallbrook, being the good man he was, pulled over immediately. "My nephew isn't feeling well," Charlie told Jim. "Could you give us a ride to the next town?" Jim didn't hesitate. He even paid for an adjoining motel room in Llano so they'd have a place to stay. After dinner at a local diner, Charlie drugged Jim's drink. When Lucia was asleep, Charlie strangled Jim in the motel bathroom. But here's the part that makes this story even more chilling. Charlie didn't just want to kill Jim. He wanted to steal his life, piece by piece. Charlie staged the scene to make it look like Jim had left voluntarily. He took Lucia, telling her that her father was hurt and had been taken to the hospital. With forged documents and by constantly moving, he kept her hidden. Over months and years, Charlie systematically destroyed Lucia's sense of reality. He told her Margaret was dead. He changed her name to Samantha. He made her believe that he was her protector, that the outside world was dangerous. "And my husband's body?" Margaret asks Detective Reyes through tears. Reed says Charlie disposed of it in a limestone sinkhole, the detective explains gently. "We're working to locate the site for recovery." The red Cadillac had been hidden in a wooded area all these years. Reed brought it to the junkyard, hoping to finally destroy the evidence, never imagining that Margaret still ran those television segments every year. But the most heartbreaking revelation comes when Margaret learns about Charlie Carnes himself. He's not just a killer. He's a serial predator who's been evading capture for decades. He drifts from place to place, taking young women and girls, controlling them through fear and isolation. The other women they rescued from the farmhouse, they've been missing for years too, their families never knowing what happened to them. As Margaret holds vigil beside Lucia's hospital bed, her daughter suddenly speaks. "I'm so sorry for being so broken. Lucia whispers, her voice raspy from years of barely speaking. "It's not your fault, sweetheart," Margaret says, tears streaming down her face. "None of this was your fault." "I miss Daddy," Lucia says, and something in her voice, the way she says Daddy, reminds Margaret painfully of the 8-year-old girl who left on that road trip. Though Lucia is 24 now, part of her is still trapped in that moment when her world ended. But she's alive. After 16 years, she's alive. And with time, love, and healing, maybe she can find her way back to the light. This case haunts me because it shows us something terrifying about human nature. Jim Hallbrook was murdered specifically because he was kind, because he saw strangers in need and stopped to help. Charlie Carnes preyed on people's basic humanity, turning their compassion into a weapon against them. Reed Caraway, just a child when this started, was molded into a monster by someone who should have protected him. But this story also shows us something beautiful. Margaret never gave up. For 16 years, she kept searching, kept hoping, kept believing her daughter was out there somewhere. Micah Caraway, despite his fear, found the courage to do the right thing when it mattered most. Lucia's recovery was long and difficult, but with her mother's love and professional help, she slowly began to heal. She was eventually able to testify against Charlie Carnes, helping ensure he'd never hurt anyone again. The red Cadillac was finally laid to rest, along with the nightmare it represented. Jim's body was recovered and given a proper burial, and a family torn apart by evil was finally, slowly, learning to be whole again. Sometimes the monsters are closer than we think, but sometimes love really can conquer all. If this story affected you, please like and share the video and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And remember, if you ever see something suspicious, speak up. You might just save a life. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next case.